Building on these fascinating insights, we have our next session, which is supported by the Canopy Foundation, addressing one of the most critical challenges of our time, decarbonization and material innovation, as we transition towards the next generation economy. This session will offer perspectives from brands, producers, and investors in the textile ecosystem on the future of material substitution as a core business as well as a climate strategy. We are privileged to have a distinguished panel with us that will guide us through this complex and forward-looking discussion. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists for the session on the new frontier, decarbonization, material innovation, and the next-gen economy. Aparna Mangla, Investment Director at British International Investment. Shruti Singh, India Hub Strategist for Canopy, who shall also be moderating the discussion. Kavya Arora, Technical Advisor for Climate Change and Circular Economy at GIZ India. Shirish Srivastava, Vice President of Sourcing at Mitra. And lastly, Sucharu Appal, Joint President of Brands and Retail at Grasim Industries Limited, Aditya Birla Group. I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Isha. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Great. Thank you for being here today. We're very excited for this panel, which talks about new frontier and decarbonization, material innovation, and the next-gen economy. We know climate change is a problem, and there is an urgency to address that. And whenever we speak about decarbonization, there's a lot of focus on renewable energy, on climate tech, but in fashion, which is what we would be focusing on today, and fashion and textiles, 96% of the emissions come from raw materials, which means that becomes really important to address what do we do with those raw materials. The fibers play a really big role. So today with the rest of the panel, which they come from across the industry, we have a brand, we have investor, we have someone who does strategy and has worked on international policy. So with all of them, we would get diverse perspectives on this topic. Truly, how do we accelerate this sector and what would it take to really scale? Without further ado, I would start with Kavya. Kavya, GIZ has worked a lot on the textile front. You're doing several projects in India. And I want to ask you, what has your experience been in this sector? And where do you think that, how can recycled materials play a role in moving the needle on circular economy? And where do you see as an ecosystem, where are we moving and where do you see the change happening?
Thank you for the question, Shruti. I work with the German Development Corporation and we are engaging with both the government and the private sector through our bilateral and public-private partnership programs looking at circularity, sustainability and inclusion in the textile value chain. And we've seen both positive and negative changes in the ecosystem. There are quite a few positives in the sense that there is a growing demand from customers when they want better materials, they want to buy sustainable, they want to buy from conscious brands. At the same time, there's also a movement in the industry where they're looking at substituting better materials, improving things across their value chain. But there are challenges when we talk about a defined vision for this sector. It's not that the big players in the market are all on the same platform and have agreed on a shared goal that this is what they would like to achieve in a certain period of time. So circularity, everyone has their own understanding of it. Everybody is trying to do something about it, but there's no clear defined criteria that everyone has come to consensus on that this is what we as an industry should achieve. And at the same time, even though the government is also prioritizing this, so last year, not last year actually, this year in Bharat Text 2024, there was a lot of focus from the Ministry of Textiles on sustainability also. But creating that shared vision in a sector that is so diverse, that's also very unorganized to an extent, because a lot of textile and apparel production in India happens through MSMEs. There are of course big brands, but there's also a lot of unorganized, scattered production across the country. So how do you define circularity for all of these stakeholders? I think that is something that GIZ as an organization tries to provide a platform for. We, just things that Canopy is doing. We also try to bring players from different parts of the value chain together to understand what they need and how can we take it to the government, how they can include it in their policy directives for the coming years and a lot of those things. At the same time, we also work with people who are not a part of the formal value chain, the textile value chain. So we are working with waste workers directly, and Shruti mentioned, how do we see the ecosystem developing? How does recycling play a role in this? Of course, India being, a lot of us still have traditional mindsets. We don't throw away clothing items very easily. We probably pass it to someone. It could be a donation. It will probably be brought down to a level where it's a rug and then it gets thrown. So there's also a huge informal economy that's related here, and the idea is that when you want to create a system that sustains, a recycling system that sustains and that creates value at the end of the day, you need to involve these informal chains also, because they are the ones who will collect your textile waste. They need to be trained on how to segregate that textile waste based on its quality, its composition, and of course the collection system, the capacities, all of that right now is lacking. It's happening in a few pockets across the country, maybe in a few textile clusters, maybe an organization like Sahas is doing a small initiative in and around Bangalore, but it's definitely not at a scale where we can say that we've done something positive. Even the Panipat textile industry runs on huge volumes, but it again relies on scattered pockets of work from across the country, and it's just informally employing people to segregate clothes, and most of that fabric or fiber gets downcycled because these people are not trained on understanding the composition of that fabric, and at the same time, because it's mechanical recycling, it's not high value. They just make cheaper garments out of it or use it as a filler in your mattresses, in your rugs, or in textiles. So over a period of time, we start losing value from those materials, and I think that is what needs to be addressed. Of course, at the same time, there are positives in the ecosystem. We are all here discussing this. I think conversations take these things forward, and yes, I think a lot of stakeholders in this space are now working towards these knowledge gaps, these capacity gaps, and these skill gaps. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kavya. I think that what you spoke about, having a shared vision, is really important. And there are so many players who are already doing really, really good work, and you need the ecosystem, the formal, the informal as well. So I think that was really great, and your focus on MSMEs as well. I did want to bring a point about the work that Canopy is doing with Restart. That's also one of the collectives with Fashion for Good, Lotus, and IDH, where we have actually set a goal, and we said, okay, let's set a goal of bringing back 1 million tons of recycled textiles back into the supply chain. And that's, like Valerie said, it's a mammoth goal, and it needs everyone to kind of work together on it. And that's where investment counts, right? Because there is investment going into multiple projects. So how can we have a shared vision for that investment as well, so that it leads to the desired impact faster? So I will come to you, Sucharu, next, because we spoke about MSMEs, but there's a bigger role to be played by bigger organizations because of the sheer volumes that you deal with. And a lot of you are familiar with Aditya Birla Brands. Birla Cellulose has been doing a lot of work in this space, and can you describe to the people in the room, where do you sit in the value chain when it comes to really bringing in the next gen economy, and how does recycling and material substitution sit within the entire sustainability goals of the group itself?
So, very relevant. I want to thank Valerie for the macro context she presented, and the panelists here who presented a very micro MSME point of view. On the side that I present a view from, like Valerie said, the second largest viscose producer globally. We are currently, if we see our journey into next-gen fiber solutions probably begun in the year 2019, we are committed to use 100,000 tons of next-generation material this year and next year, we're nowhere near target. That's not due to lack of intent or due to a lack of capital deployment or resource allocation. It's more due to lack of material availability out there that can be substituted. Now, further to this, by 2040, we have a net carbon zero goal, an internal target of 2035 for accelerating our own carbon footprint, reducing it by 50%. And in that space, the material substitution itself possibly plays a 65% role. On the 35%, which is the production efficiency, resource reutilization, circulation, we've made great headway. We've got zero liquid discharges, we've got EU-backed, the best available techniques deployed in productions. But when it comes to really substituting the material from wood to alternative materials that are there, today the reality is that is only 1/3000th of our production use case. So is there a market? Is there a demand? Huge yes. Are we near near it? We've not even begun. I think in India is at the tipping point. So as Birla Cellulose, not only are we trying, I think we're trying very hard to look at, work with the innovators out there to see how this material substitution can happen. We are looking at some of the garments that are there on display within this room itself has come from our, our R&D as well as our pilot plants. So we're working with solutions which are from agri-waste. We're looking at solutions which are from food waste. Very successfully have we pilot trialed from textile waste, and we've actually brought in over 1,000 tons this year to the market which are actually made from textile waste. So I think the real challenge for us lies in scalability. And there is a use case for catalytic investment here to help these pulp innovators whose use case we have demonstrated to help set up facilities. We ourselves have put about $2.5 million we invested in putting up a textile waste collection as well as resource, trying to use cellulose from cotton cut waste ourselves and bring it to market, which we've successfully deployed. But from where we are to where we need to go, it's a huge journey for which we definitely need that point which she brought in about how unorganized and how widespread the industry is, how it needs to come together is very, very valid.
Thanks, Charu. And this is from the production side. And when we move on to who's using these raw materials ultimately, I'll move on to Shirish yourself with the Flipkart group. Flipkart group was also one of the first to sign policies with Canopy and say we'll not source from ancient and endangered forests. You've actively worked on improving the packaging front and MMCFs as well. Tell us about how this journey has been, and as a business, what did it take to really champion this within the supply chains, and what impact has it led to?
Thank you, Shruti. Flipkart has always been at the forefront of adopting next-gen materials, whether it comes to packaging or garmenting. And I remember Canopy has been a stable partner for us in this journey. We have been working on a lot of initiatives with Canopy on trying to become more and more sustainable in terms of every aspect of supply chain. Pack for Good was one of the projects that we did with Canopy, where we transformed the entire packaging material into a very sustainable packaging profile. And it took a lot of effort, but we thought it was very, very important for us, because being in an e-com industry which generates so much of volume, packaging can be a big nuisance on the environment. And it was very important, not just from a social point of view, but from an industry responsibility point of view as well, for us to take a position on that. And we worked very closely with Canopy into converting everything into a very, very sustainable packaging material. So we are into paper packaging as we talk. We also collect equal amount of packaging material from the outside world as much we use. we recycle them and give it back to the environment. So we do try and be very conscious about try to solve each lever of our supply chain, each lever of our logistics, and try to become more and more sustainable as we go ahead. We are doing a lot of projects already with the Canopy, like plastic leakage project is another project that we are spearheading with Canopy. So as I said, it's not a zero. I mean, it's a zero-sum game. Unless and until we reach a place where we are completely sustainable, we cannot sit quiet. We cannot have a sense of inaction to it. Unless and until we solve every matrix that is solvable, I think we will, as a group, keep working towards it and trying to solve it every day, every minute.
And coming to the investors, Aparna, where do you see, you work a lot in emerging economies, and now you see this as an emerging field, you've heard your co-panelists. Where do you see the role that investors can play, and how do you imagine that this economy of alternative fibers will evolve?
Thanks, Shruti. BII is UK government's development finance institution, and we invest capital through debt, equity, and through funds in Asia and in Africa. And most of our investments are in two themes. One is climate, and the other is inclusion. So this topic is obviously quite interesting for us, and something, I mean, we understand it's quite nascent, but that's something that we have been tracking, and we've been trying to find opportunities there. From our perspective, given the size of the entire sector and the market, the reduction in GHG that's possible through the innovations that our panelists have mentioned here are very important for us. Reduction in scope 3 emissions, using greener sources of power for manufacturing, for the textile industry, finding solutions for zero waste and zero liquid discharges, usage of alternative materials like my panelists mentioned, and reduction in usage of water. I think all these are themes that we are deeply interested in through our climate theme that we invest in. I think the key for us is that where various stakeholders in the entire supply chain could come together to form a more sustainable solution for us. I think that is something that we would definitely like to see in the ecosystem. Something where manufacturer, innovator, brands, investors, they all could come together to join hands and scale this up and commercialize the solutions. That is something that definitely will attract more capital into the sector for sure. It could be in the fund format, or it could be not, or in debt format. But a scaled up opportunity is something that investors like us, other DFIs and impact investors are watching the space for.
And coming back to Kavya with this, where did you, you've worked here for a while, so where has GIZ, or where have you seen the financing gaps? And what role do you think government can really play in moving this needle?
So I think when you talk about sustainability and circularity, there are running businesses and the rest of it is all a finance gap. So when we started our work on textile waste management and circularity, this was nearly 3-4 years ago now. One of the developed partnerships that we had was with Concordia Textiles, which is a company based in Belgium. And with them, we were looking at managing cotton textile waste in India, procuring it from different sources in the south, and then rejuvenating that fiber with the help of a third-party provider technology. And the model ran well for 3 years. The only thing that happened after the project was over, it faltered because we did not have any kind of financial support from either the government or the local municipal bodies, or even from the people who were, giving us their waste to deal with it. So we realized that a lot of these small businesses that innovate on circularity and sustainability, they need some time to be able to stabilize themselves. They need a cushion to survive in the market, and that's where something like blended capital would come in. You would need investment, of course, because it's a business that needs to sustain in the long term, but at the same time, something like a philanthropy, finance or philanthropy investment also needs to definitely come in. We, as a part of our project with Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail, we did an innovation challenge across the country last year. Our focus was on what kind of circularity approaches and ideas do entrepreneurs and students and researchers in the country have. And we received, I think, 87 applications from across the country, of which nearly 10 to 15 focused on alternative materials. These could be from agri sources, of course. There was hemp, banana, pineapple fibers, and there were innovators that focused on recycled materials, upcycled materials. And for most of them, I think of the 10 or 15 that we had, I think there's barely 3 were able to, thrive as a business in the market. The rest of them, they have a lot of ideas, they've tested those, but the moment you try to scale it to make it viable in partnership with a big brand, that's where there's a lack of protocols. They're not able to fulfill the demand even if a brand is showing interest. And some of them were just at the R&D stage. These were innovative students and researchers who were coming up with new ideas. So I think with that understanding, there needs to be a push for designing for circularity at all levels. So this starts with students who are studying design, be it at a fashion institute, be it textile engineers, be it people working with agro waste. So that's how you cultivate that sort of thinking in people, and that's where the funding for education comes in. And then later you of course move into brands, and one of the innovators that we met through this innovation challenge was someone who was making betterments to the wet processing process in textile manufacturing. And a lot of big brands showed interest in that, but the only thing is that it required such a huge investment upfront, which ran into tens of crores, that even brands who were interested were not able to take that out because they weren't sure if they'll be able to recover that money in the long run, or they weren't sure of putting in that much money to start with. So that's where a lot of investment capital can come in and support these initiatives to at least give them a push to start with, and then we see how it plays in the coming few years. So those are the big aspects of it. And making a small comment on the micro, even if we sort a lot of these things out, to get good recycled material, we need to focus on our sorting and collection systems, which I think most of you here would know. We struggle with municipal waste. Plastics and batteries were doing slightly better. Paper we are able to manage better because it gives you a return. So the Rathiwala gives you money for the newspapers and every piece of paper that you collect for him, but you do not have the same incentive for textiles. So there is something that is being piloted in Navi Mumbai right now with reverse resources and IDH. They are looking at traceability platforms for tracking all of your textile waste that is coming, and this is being done in a partnership with the municipality. But I think there are players who can come in to pilot more of these models with municipalities, say in the north, which are crowded, or maybe in textile clusters in the country. You can go to Tirupur, you can go to Surat or Ahmedabad, and there needs to be finance that comes in to show that this can be successful, and only then will a business or an investor take it up. So we need money to actually show that things can work. I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah, it's like a chicken and egg situation, right? You want to see proof of concept, but proof of concept also needs pilots, and pilots need investment to mobilize it. But I also want to say that it's not just a good thing to do, it's also a really big opportunity for the economy. It's a great opportunity for businesses because there are a lot of regulations coming up like EPR, which, and there's so much focus on circularity. It's also about future-proofing your supply chains. And on that note, back to you, Sucharu. You have actively invested within the organization, but also with a lot of innovators, because you see that potential and the business case for this. So I want to ask you, how has that experience been, and where are the emerging opportunities? Like, where should investors really look to bridging the gaps in the supply chain?
So I think the original few years of this exploration for us has been in getting proof of concepts and getting proof of these technologies to work. And I think this is the point in scale. You mentioned the European Union regulation. out of the 17 odd billion of 38, 40 billion textile and apparel export industry that we have, of course, is a wish list to the government to grow it to 100 billion by 2030. Our domestic industry is at about 120 billion, tipped to be 300 billion by 2030. Now, out of the export industry, approximately 35% is servicing Europe. Now, Europe has already passed a regulation for extended producer responsibility, that brands are not only responsible for producing as well as bringing forth the merchandise into the stores, but are also responsible for its end of life. Now that means that there has been an upswing of businesses which are emerging in the European Union for collection and sorting of waste, as well as bringing it back into textile circularity. A lot of technologies are emerging, and again, proof of those technologies as well, both in textile to textile conversion, polyester as well as cotton, have been successfully proven, but these need to be scaled. Now, what that means is, if India is to continue supplying into the EU zone, we have to also comply with those extended producer responsibilities, and equally be responsible to take back not only our waste, but also all cellulosic waste that we can reconvert back into textile. Now, for us, like Nicole very rightly mentioned, we are a commodity player, and Valerie also alluded to this. We need the cost of these next generation materials to come closer to virgin materials for this to become a routine circular environment rather than be cherry on the cake, expensive materials as on date. Now what this needs is not only, my panelists very ably explained what the current situation in India is of a very fabricated, broken market. But there is a huge case for the industry to come together, government and policy to come together to put in large collection of waste. And as a case in point, because of the European Union regulation, the Norwegian government has already said that all textile waste will be collected by them, sorted by them, distributed by them to the correct end of life users, and be brought back to textile. Now there is room for, we will learn from all of this, and there is room for deployment of government aid and support, not only in collecting of waste, but also in financial capital to come in waste sorting, and there is room for technology play in segregation of material by component type, and then get back into the ecosystem. So for someone like us, it's an absolute basic hygiene that we need to be a part of this ecosystem to not only help identify technologies, but also help to scale these technologies, because we are the ones who will be using the materials from these various technologies to bring it back into commercial use. Now all of this, while the use case is established, there is demand from our side, there is therefore the need. The very special thing for India is, and we've been working with, say, Reverse Resources in Bangladesh, and now they're piloting a use case in India. So the waste actually, the funny thing is India is very, very involved in this waste collection segregation, but it is very, very undistributed, unorganized at the moment. So even Reverse Resources is collecting the waste from India. It is giving it to pulp innovators which are currently located globally. They ideally all need to be located here. The waste is coming to Kandla. The waste is getting distributed from Kandla and going back to Europe, and then coming back to India again to someone like us for to use. So all of this there is an absolute use case. Not only do we have a historical legacy on working with various textiles, we've got in India as I think one of the only countries which works both with the cotton system, polyester system, and the man-made cellulosics, viscose, and lyocell system. Now all of this have actually use cases in all these three areas of mechanical recycling in cotton, chemical recycling of end-of-life cotton with someone like us, textile to textile, polyester recycling, as well as man-made cellulosic and alternate next-gen feedstocks to be used someone like us. Now this is actually pointing out to a large commoditizing play that is established and can be, kind of regenerated not only for employment but also will in the end help our issues of stubble burning, pollution, as well as creating this entire next gen economy. So it's actually India's at a very strategic role that can play, as well as we are at a very strategic time. And I think between now and the next 3-5 years and come 2030, it will be a changed landscape. And anybody who's an early investor in this space, helping out with these pulp innovators to help establish and put up their facilities here, scale it up along with government and policy intervention, they will find it very rewarding in this to play in this zone.
That's brilliant. Thank you for mapping out where the support of investors comes in and where do innovators play a role. I think it's when we're talking about climate, it's also surprising that when you said it goes out of India and comes back and goes out, the emissions with just transportation alone can come down, not just material substitution, which will play a big role. Coming back to you, Shirish, on brands, because brands, again, the more the brands adopt next-gen solutions, that signals to the market that this is what we want, and producers know what to produce. What is the brand looking in the next 4-5 years, because they work with their fiber mix, their material mix, and build their sustainability strategies. So my question for you is, what does it take as an organization to really build that consensus internally, and what role do you think brands can play? How do you galvanize that support internally within your teams and externally with your stakeholders?
I think I have two points to make here. Nothing is going to be more important than education, and it's the brand's responsibility, and every player in the ecosystem has to talk to its stakeholders, to its consumers, about the importance of this initiative. Brands again have to educate their consumers that a recycled product might not look and feel like a virgin product. There are going to be certain compromises in the end product, but the cost of not adopting to these changes are going to be huge. And as and when we go deeper into this cycle, you will find a lot of adoption, a lot of acceptability coming in from the consumers. Again, it's a chicken and egg kind of situation where if a consumer becomes more and more conscious about what he's buying, not looking at the sheen of the product and the hand feel of the product, and accepting the product with the value that it is bringing in the ecosystem, I think that is going to be a huge change. So again, it's a responsibility of not just the brands, but I think everybody who is creating this ecosystem to inform the consumers about the benefits. And I think we should have done it yesterday, but now we are living in an era where it has to be done on war footing, and we are already seeing what has happened in the electronic vehicle segment, where the revolution has taken up and something similar has to be done in this industry. The second point I want to make is that all the brands will now have to hold hands and speak in one language when it comes to passing on the sustainability and its options to the consumer on the price points as well, because it's always a war between brands where one person tries to go sustainable, his prices go up, and the second person just reduces the price by going towards the other direction. We have seen when brands join hands what magic can happen. In the Rana Plaza tragedy which happened in Bangladesh, and an accord agreement was signed across brands, and we are now seeing where Bangladesh is, and that is the effect which can happen if brands talk in one language. They have to come on a platform. They have to speak as one voice when it comes to a subject like sustainability. A brand can earn a rupee here, a rupee today, but at the end of the day, everybody is going to lose in this war, and we will all lose. It's not that he's going to win and I'm going to lose. If the environment goes for a toss, nobody's going to survive. And this messaging has to happen. A platform has to be created where everybody is on the same platform talking about similar sustainability initiatives. Today, H&M talks something different from the rest of the brands, and the rest of the brands are at their own language. But I think we all have to now come together on a platform where we talk one language, one mission, one goal, one direction, and come out of the war on price because of going in different directions. It's doable, but I think it has to be done as soon as possible.
brings us back to the shared vision where we started with, where what Kavya said, that we do need a shared vision, not just because it's a great thing to galvanize towards one goal, but because it makes business sense as well. Again, because you're talking about optimizing supply chains. That also leads me to my next question to Aparna. How do you de-risk? What are the strategies to help de-risk investments in the next gen economy?
Sure. So as we know, the entire sector, I mean, it does have a few barriers, like we have spoken about. I think high upfront capex cost is definitely one of them, and the banks do not understand that risk as well. And there can, there could be also business integrity risks when we're talking about smaller, MSME kind of manufacturers as well. So credit underwriting overall is very hard in the ecosystem. And also, coupled with the ESG risks, the worker conditions, human rights issues, although it is obviously a great opportunity to support the women workers who might be in the entire industry. I think it's one where there are a lot of women employees as well. Also, I think the cost, like who bears the burden of the increased cost? There's a huge role for policy to play there as well with subsidies. But even with that, in the long run, these technologies and the entire solution has to be sustainable and has to be unit economic positive. Those are some of the challenges. But having said that, I think impact investors and DFIs like us, we do have differentiated pools of capital as well, which can help nascent industries such as this one. We have BII apart from our growth capital, where of course we do take the risk on the impact side, but then also returns are expected there. But we have two other pools of capital apart from growth capital, which is catalyst capital and kinetic capital, where it gives us more flexibility to take higher risks, but also achieve higher impact. So I think just blended finance solutions, giving TA, for example, junior debt facilities. I think all of those are something that we at BII can look at. Even guarantees, I would think. I think those kind of things would be quite useful in this environment, and where BII is going to support such innovations.
Thanks, Aparna. In the interest of time, and I know our panelists also have meetings to attend to, I have a last question for all the panelists, and we will take audience questions as well, but one of our panelists has to leave. So Aparna, I'll start with you. What is just one word answer, one technology or an innovation or a breakthrough moment you think you're most excited about and you think that is going to shape and accelerate, it's like the tipping point for this industry to move forward?
I think proof of concept. I hope keywords are allowed. I think we discussed this. Yeah, just
so
proof of
we have proof of concept.
Yeah.
Kavya.
I think agri-based materials, both for fabric, for dyeing and clothing.
Unlocking the agricultural based materials.
I'll say brand collaboration.
Brand collaboration.
I'm going to say textile to textile recycling, especially in polyester.
Textile, you took mine. Textile to textile recycling. And yeah, and I really believe that all of us coming together, it's an all of ecosystem approach on this one. I'll open it up to questions from the audience now, and maybe we can take 3 questions. Yes, please.
Hi, Aditya from Metallica. Point taken on the fact that investing and upfront investing is required. But brands have to come up with, and especially the European brands, have to come up with revenue assurance. Now that's something which is critical to any upfront investing or catalytic investing or crowding enough capital. How to solve that? Because revenue assurance, and this is to start only, yeah.
So it's a very good question, and Srish made a very important point on brand collaboration. There's a lot of there is policy pressure, like I mentioned. Already we're seeing. You mentioned the European zone. European zone has already given an indication that each industry has to be responsible for their textile waste. Now, that what it means is not textile, their own waste. So what that means is that as a byproduct, as an example, there was 26% less PET bottles available for recycled polyester manufacturing last year in Europe because the packaging industry had to use back its waste. Now we believe that's an early indication for the next regulation to come in to say that PET to textile is not going to be no longer recycled. It will be textile to textile recycling. Now when that happens, brands today who are, without naming any brand, who are very proudly carrying recycled polyester, recycled cotton, 55%, 80%, whatever percent, the numbers game, they will all be brought to a common denominator of saying now the regulation is textile to textile recycling. So all brands have in their strategies declared that by 2030, it was 2025, post-COVID we've seen some milestones move to 2030, already saying that next-gen materials have to be 20%, 25% of the material mix, right? Now, between 2025, 27 when we expect this policy regulation to come in and 2030 when they've said 20% of their existing materials have to be next-gen materials. Look at the case in point where there is no leverage for moving. So the demand case is existing. It is just, it's possibly not there visible today. But our belief is in the runway to 2030, 2027, 28 will be a very big tipping point.
Do we have more questions?
I am Prabhav. I work with Haftarshak. Some people, some of the panelists spoke about ethical treatment of workers. That's a work interest. But my question is, today there are quite a few incentives / push factors which are pushing brands and platforms like Myntra and others to move to sustainability. And I'm always trying to imagine what are the incentives. There are multiple incentives that are being trying to create that drive them. Which one, according to you, out of all, be it regulation, be it financial, be it conscious consumerism, what do you think actually is the one which will be the workhorse, which will actually drive what at the scale here today? Just curious about that from your perspective.
I think corporate responsibility. If you're working in this ecosystem, you are one of the largest players in this ecosystem, it becomes your responsibility. The moment you start working towards a policy, towards circumventing a government-regulated norm, I think we have defeated the purpose. And we are a very responsible organization, we set our own standards, we set our own goals, and we do not need a policy to come and define what we do. I think, and I can speak on behalf of everybody, every corporate, that it should be their responsibility. The burden of becoming sustainable has to lie on them. They should not be looking at a scoreboard and trying to achieve that scoreboard for the year and then start preparing for the next year. I think it's, again, as I said, it's a zero-sum game. Till you reach 100% sustainable organization, you should not give up.
Last question for this panel. Who wants to go next?
Everybody's been shy. No one else actually, perhaps in the gallery, but we've already heard from her.
Well, if there are no more questions, that means you guys did a great job preempting and answering everything. And we're really, really looking forward to all of your efforts in this direction. And I think what I'm taking back from this panel is shared vision. And we just need to figure out, there is investment available, but how to deploy it and make sure that the efforts are not segregated, but like really they come together towards a common goal will be the one that we have to crack. So thank you, everyone.